forms of acceleration. The first is technological acceleration, which you can very easily measure. There's no one disputes that we can actually see this form of acceleration. It's the acceleration of transport, communication, and production, namely. But then there was the second form, namely the acceleration of social change, which you could define as that the patterns of association and even social practices and the forms of knowledge change or exchange at a higher rate. And thirdly, that there's an acceleration of the pace of life. We try to literally live faster, on a faster path by multitasking, right? If we do two things simultaneously, we get more things done by trying to get rid of breaks in between. That's what we normally do, even at the summer university here, right? We try to plan as tightly as possible, not have any spots of any empty spots in between. And thirdly, we just try to do things faster. You remember the power nap and the drive-through, you know. And then the argument was that this kind of gets a self-propelling system. Those three levels or spheres of acceleration are kind of self-propelling. They feed back on each other, but there are three external motors, namely the capitalism. In a capitalist system, time is almost like money, or time is treated like money. And since money is necessarily scarce in an economic system, time is scarce too. With the Marxian, with the logic of Marxist theory, time is a factor of production, and therefore saving time is making profit. And then there's another motor, which is functional differentiation, or you could also say the division of labor. And thirdly, there was this cultural motor, when I made the argument that speeding up is the answer of modern society towards the problem of death and finitude, because it almost adds up to the idea of having an infinite life before death. I think I also wanted to answer those questions which were still open after our last meeting. So one question was, why would we want to have several lives before we die? I mean, I think that's rather easy to answer. I mean, because the idea is that no living being wants to die, right? So therefore, religions kind of always say, well, there is life after death. Almost all, I think actually all religions do, right? So somehow we have to account for the fact that we know we will die. So one solution to that problem is, well, but there will be another life after it, like the Hindus say, right? It's like changing clothes. So, but if you live in a secular society, which somehow does no longer believe, or in our everyday experience, we no longer are convinced, or many of us are not convinced, that there will be life after death. So therefore, the idea of eternal life before death sneaks in, meaning, yes, I will die some point in the future, but before that there's an infinite wealth of life and of experiences. So I think it's not a necessary step, but it's just the logic, the cultural logic of modern society. Okay, so now this is the overall idea of social acceleration, but now, as I said, we have to look at those things which do not speed up, and of course there are quite a few of them. So the first would be, as I said, 5 categories. So the first is very obvious, you don't have to think hard about that, right? There are things which cannot be sped up at all. So it says natural or anthropological limits. Natural limits are, for example, a day still lasts 24 hours, right? There's not much we can do about that. And the year lasts a year, namely 365 days. But there are other things too. For example, nature takes its time to, for example, produce oil, right? Because oil is a natural product, but the production of this resource takes ages, and there's not much we can do about that too. And actually also, if we poison something like a river or so, it takes some time until the river recovers. So there are natural speed limits, there are also anthropological. But by the way, we're always trying to manipulate them, right? The natural, for example, the natural limits. It's interesting that in farming they try to artificially fake days and make them shorter. I read that. For one thing, with the pillar trees, probably it's trees which have apples and pears and that kind of stuff, right? And it takes them about 15 years or 20 until they really have lots of fruits. So they somehow manage to have these tiny, it's almost like throwaway trees, right? They have full number of fruits after 3 or 4 years, but then they die after 15 or 20 or so years. So that's actually accelerating natural processes. And also, which I find very funny, in chicken farms,